The air in the precinct smelled like stale coffee, cheap disinfectant, and the quiet desperation of a Monday night. Detective Alex Thorne, 32, perpetually tired eyes set deep in a sharp, intelligent face, was staring at a map tacked to his corkboard. It was a grid of the city's old industrial sector, a forgotten labyrinth of abandoned factories, cracked warehouses, and silent, overgrown rail yards. "Thorne, you've been at that damn map for an hour. Go home. You look like a haunted pencil," grumbled Sergeant Miller from his cluttered desk. Alex ignored him. The map wasn't helping with the 3 disappearances in the last 2 weeks. 3 people, a night watchman, a homeless man, and a young graffiti artist, all vanished within a quarter-mile radius in the abandoned Sector 4. No forced entry, no struggle, just cold, clean absence. "It's the radius, Sarge. It's too tight. It's almost precise," Alex muttered, tapping his pen on a spot labeled, "The Old Monarch Steel Mill." A sharp ring cut through the quiet. It was the dispatch line. Alex picked it up on the second ring. "Thorne." The dispatcher's voice, usually a monotonous drone, was strained. "Detective, we have a call." Silent alarm tripped at the Monarch Steel Mill in Sector 4. "Unit 503 is en route." But, the caller sounded panicked. Said he was the last maintenance guy, said he saw something on the perimeter camera that shouldn't exist. "What do you mean, shouldn't exist?" Alex's gut tightened. He wouldn't elaborate, detective. Just kept repeating, "It's wrong, it's all wrong. It's outside the light." He dropped the line right after. "Unit 503 is almost there." Alex grabbed his jacket, the stiff leather cool against his back. "I'm going. Send me the coordinates for the main security office. And patch me through to 503. 10 minutes later, Alex's unmarked sedan was bouncing over cracked asphalt roads in Sector 4. The Monarch Mill loomed ahead, a colossal, rust-colored beast of a building that hadn't seen a furnace fire in 20 years. The moon was a sickly, half-eaten slice in the sky, casting long, deceiving shadows. He was patched through to Officer David Riley, Unit 503. Riley was a young rookie, barely 6 months on the force, known for his overeagerness and strict adherence to Protocol 503, report. "I'm at the main gate, detective. It's sealed. No sign of forced entry. I hear the alarm, muffled, coming from inside. I'm going to breach the side access door. Protocol dictates, forget protocol, Riley. Find that maintenance guy. And do not go inside alone." Before Riley could reply, a high-pitched, metallic shriek ripped through the air, even over the static of the radio. It wasn't the alarm. It sounded like steel tearing. "Riley. What was that?" "Silence, 503, respond." Only static. Then, a ragged, terrified whisper, barely audible, "Detective, the shadows, they're not empty. They're heavy." The radio went dead. Alex slammed on the brakes, dust billowing around the car. He killed the engine, the silence immediately becoming oppressive. He pulled his standard-issue SIG P226 from its holster and chambered around. He approached the main gate, a 20-foot expanse of corrugated iron. The alarm siren was a faint, pathetic whine from the depths of the complex. Alex noticed the anomaly instantly. The maintenance guy's car was parked neatly outside the gate, a battered Honda Civic. But the passenger side window wasn't shattered, it was imploded. The glass hadn't broken out, it had been pressed in, as if by a massive, invisible fist, leaving a perfect, crater-like hole. Alex's gaze snapped up to the gate. Unit 503, Officer Riley's patrol car, was there. Empty. Its light bar was still silently flashing red and blue against the rusted iron facade, and then he saw it. On the main gate, scrawled clumsily with what looked like dried mud or industrial grease, was a single, disturbing symbol, a perfect, interlocking helix of 3 loops. Alex recognized the symbol from the only piece of evidence retrieved from the 3 disappearance sites, a small, almost microscopic etching on a dropped coin. But here, it was enormous that he stepped closer, shining his flashlight. The dirt wasn't dirt. It was dried, black blood. And underneath the twisted symbol, etched deep into the rusted metal of the gate, was a single, chilling message, written in the same dark substance, not smeared, but deliberately carved: "The light has gone out. Now we can see." What Alex didn't see, as he stared at the terrifying message, was the subtle shifting of the shadows directly behind Riley's empty patrol car, a blackness deeper than the night, taking the distinct shape of a man standing perfectly still. Alex's breath hitched. He spun, his SIG P226 raised, flashlight beam cutting through the dense gloom. "Police! Show your hands." The light beam settled on the empty space behind Officer Riley's cruiser. There was nothing. Just the abandoned car, the ominous gate, and the overwhelming silence of the dead industrial zone. Had the stress of the 3 missing persons finally made him hallucinate, he forced himself to breathe, lowering his gun slightly but keeping his finger near the trigger. That shape, that perfect stillness, it felt more real than the gate in front of him. He moved to Riley's cruiser. The driver's side door was ajar. On the seat, the officer's heavy-duty radio mic lay tangled, covered in the same black, grease-like substance from the gate. Alex picked it up gingerly with a gloved hand. It was oily and cold. He opened the trunk release. Inside, alongside the flares and first aid kit, was Riley's extra utility belt, complete with his spare handcuffs and flashlight. Riley was a stickler for rules. He would never abandon his gear. Alex turned his attention back to the Monarch Mill. The gate was locked with a heavy chain and padlock. He moved along the perimeter fence, heading toward the side access door Riley had mentioned. The air grew perceptibly colder as he walked, a damp chill that smelled of mineral dust and stagnant water. He reached the side door, a heavy steel slab set into the brick wall. It was slightly ajar. Riley had breached it. He pushed the door open, his flashlight leading the way into a cavernous loading bay. The beam caught dust motes dancing in the limited light filtering through the grime-caked windows high above. "Riley. Maintenance. Police." His voice echoed mockingly off the steel beams and empty conveyor belts. A faint sound answered him, not a human response, but a low, wet scrape, like something dragging a heavy sack across concrete. Deep within the complex, Alex moved toward the sound, passing stacks of decaying pallets and giant, silent machines draped in thick, spiderweb-laden tarps. He found what he was looking for in the middle of the loading bay floor. A long, shallow trail of the black, oily substance, the blood, led away from the door and snaked toward a dark passage that plunged into the factory's core. Following the trail, Alex rounded a towering steel furnace. He stopped dead. Riley was there. Or what was left of him. The officer's jacket and uniform pants were lying neatly folded on the concrete floor, almost ceremoniously. His boots stood beside them, but Riley himself was gone. There was no blood, no torn fabric, just the unsettling, immaculate folding of the clothes. Alex's light flickered, illuminating the surrounding area. He saw the security booth tucked into the corner, the source of the silent alarm. He rushed over, pushing open the plastic door. Inside, the maintenance worker was slumped over the desk. It was an elderly man with a shock of white hair. He was dead. His eyes were wide open, staring at the monitor bank in front of him, fixed in an expression of pure, unadulterated terror. Alex checked for a pulse. Nothing. But his death was not violent. No wound, no marks. It was as if his heart had simply stopped from overwhelming fear. Alex followed the dead man's gaze to the monitor bank. The cameras were all fixed on different areas of the derelict mill. One screen, labeled Sector C, Refinery, was the focus of the man's final, horrified stare. It showed a massive, empty chamber, lit faintly by a broken overhead lamp, but it wasn't empty. In the center of the camera's view, standing perfectly upright, was a shape, tall, impossibly thin, and so deeply black that it appeared to absorb the light around it, making the air immediately adjacent to it shimmer like heat haze. The figure was holding something. A piece of fabric, like a shirt or a jacket. Alex zoomed in the digital image on the screen. It was Officer Riley's duty shirt, and then, the impossible happened. On the screen, the tall, thin shape turned its head. It didn't look at the camera, it looked past the camera. Directly into the security booth. Its head was too large, misshapen, but Alex could make out the horrific lack of features. No eyes, no nose, just a blank, oily blackness. A dry, rattling whisper seemed to vibrate from the speaker next to the monitor, cutting through the dead air in the booth. He saw the truth. Now, so do you, Detective Thorne. The screen went instantly, completely blank. Alex stumbled back, his spine hitting the metal casing of the door. He wasn't alone. Whatever was in Sector C, it knew his name. It was watching him. And it had Riley. The silence that followed the voice was heavier than before, suffocating. Alex swallowed the metallic taste of adrenaline and fear, forcing his mind to function. It knows my name. He backed out of the security booth, his eyes darting into the deep shadows of the loading bay. The neat stack of Riley's clothes was a monument to the chilling efficiency of whatever entity was operating here. It hadn't just taken the man, it had erased him, leaving behind a perfectly organized void. He pulled out his police radio. Dispatch, this is Detective Thorne. Code 10-54, officer down, suspected homicide, active threat. I need immediate backup at Monarch Mill, Sector 4. Advise responding units to approach with extreme caution. Repeat, extreme caution. He didn't wait for the confirmation. He had to assume the entity was close, maybe seconds away. The path the black trail and the security footage pointed to was the dark corridor leading to Sector C, the refinery. Alex moved toward the corridor, his flashlight beam trembling slightly. He noticed something small and rectangular near the entrance of the passage. It was a standard-issue maintenance logbook. He picked it up. Inside, the last entry, dated today, was written in the maintenance worker's shaky hand, 11:45 p.m., checked perimeter camera 4. Glitch in the feed. Total light absorption in the center frame. Called it in. It's getting bigger. It's drinking the light. Alex looked up. The overhead lamps in the corridor were functioning, but their light seemed weak, struggling to push back the surrounding gloom. It wasn't the bulbs, it was the darkness itself that felt active, a palpable, physical weight. He moved into the corridor. The temperature dropped again, sharply. The floor was now wet, slick with the black, oily substance. The air was thick with a new smell, not just dust and damp, but a high, metallic tang, like ozone mixed with old, dried blood. He found the access point to Sector C, a huge, reinforced steel door, the kind used for furnace maintenance. It was slightly ajar, warped open as if bent by an impossible force. He pushed the door wider and stepped into the refinery. Sector C was enormous, a 3-story cavern of tangled pipes, scaffolding, and the skeletal remains of giant smelting furnaces. The only illumination came from a single, broken lamp hanging 30 feet up, casting a weak, epileptic circle of yellow light on the concrete floor, and in that circle, Alex saw the 3 missing people. They weren't dead. They were suspended. The night watchman, the homeless man, and the graffiti artist were floating a few inches above the floor, their bodies unnaturally straight, limbs hanging loose. They were motionless, eyes closed, but what held them was terrifying. They were encased, completely submerged, in a shimmering, gelatinous black material that pulsed with a faint, internal light, like slow-moving, oily tar. The substance seemed to draw all ambient light into its mass, making the area around the bodies an absolute void. This was the total light absorption the maintenance man had written about, and then, Alex saw the creature that held them. It was exactly as it appeared on the screen, tall, impossibly slender, its limbs stretched and jointed in a way that defied human anatomy. It was standing directly beneath the suspended bodies, its surface a shifting, light-eating oil slick that moved with a sickening, silent grace. It was feeding. As Alex watched, the black substance around the bodies slowly began to thin, and the suspended figures visibly withered, their skin tightening over their bones. The creature pulsed, growing imperceptibly larger. It was an entity that consumed not flesh, but life force, or perhaps, simply, light. Alex realized the horror of the neatly folded clothes. The creature didn't need to destroy the material body, it just needed to empty it. He raised his gun, his hand steady despite the profound terror. "Police! Drop your weapon." The command sounded ridiculously futile against this unearthly horror. The creature didn't have a weapon. It didn't have a face, but it responded. The thin, black shape turned with a sudden, jerky movement that cracked the silence. It faced Alex, and from its oily, featureless mass, a new sound emanated, a high-pitched, resonant whine, like a tuning fork vibrating on bone. And then, the light went out. The single, broken lamp overhead, the only source of light in the vast refinery, simply snapped, not exploded, but extinguished instantly, as if sucked dry. Alex was plunged into absolute, consuming darkness. His flashlight was now the only source of light, a small, vulnerable beacon. He heard the scraping again, much closer this time. The sound of that immense, heavy weight dragging itself across the concrete, circling him in the pitch black, and the voice returned, not whispered, but echoing from all around him, a dry, multi-layered rasp that seemed to come from inside his own head. "You brought the light back, detective. Such a foolish, beautiful thing. And now, I'm hungry again." The darkness was a physical entity, pressing in, heavy and cold. Alex's flashlight beam danced wildly as he fought the instinct to turn and run. He knew if he moved blindly, the creature would have him. "Stay back!" Alex shouted, his voice cracking against the metallic air. He swung the light frantically, trying to pin down the source of the scraping sound. The beam caught a fleeting glimpse, a long, whip-like appendage of solid blackness retracting rapidly behind a huge, rusting ventilation shaft. He fired 2 rounds at the shadow where he thought the creature had been. The sound of the gunfire in the refinery was deafening, the echoes multiplying the noise until it sounded like a dozen shots. The scraping stopped. The silence was instantaneous and absolute, far worse than the noise. Alex backed up slowly, keeping his light trained on the ventilation shaft. He stumbled over something hard, a discarded wrench. He kept moving until his back hit the cold steel of the entrance door. He glanced at the 3 suspended, empty forms. They were now shrunken husks, their energy fully consumed. The oily black material that had encased them was gone, absorbed back into the darkness. It's stronger now. Alex knew he couldn't fight this thing with bullets. The thing was absorbing light and life. Conventional defense was useless. He needed to get out, call for specialized help, and most importantly, understand what it was. He turned and bolted, slamming the steel door shut behind him and trying to latch the corroded bolt, but it wouldn't catch. He ran back up the corridor, following his own footprints in the black residue. As he reached the junction between the corridor and the loading bay, he stopped. The black trail he had followed in was now much thicker, pulsing with the same slow, sickening rhythm as the creature he had just seen, and it was moving. The black substance on the floor began to bubble and rise, like thick, boiling oil. It was climbing the walls, spreading out, consuming the last vestiges of ambient light from the loading bay windows. The passage behind him was rapidly closing. He shined his light at the ceiling. The substance was spreading there too, dropping stalactite-like globs of blackness. The corridor was transforming. It was becoming a tunnel of pure, consuming shadow. He ran faster, splashing through the rising tide of oily blackness. He made it back into the main loading bay and glanced toward the outer door, the exit Riley had used. It was still open. He heard a sickening snap from the corridor behind him, the sound of steel being warped and twisted. It's closing the path. Alex sprinted across the loading bay toward the exit door. He was 10 feet away when the enormous, 2-ton steel slab of the inner access door to Sector C slammed shut with a deafening, final boom. The impact sent a shockwave of dust and noise, but it was accompanied by something far more terrifying, a fresh, wet screech of steel tearing. He realized the creature hadn't just slammed the door, it had welded it shut with sheer force, trapping itself inside Sector C, and him inside the loading bay. Relief washed over Alex for a split second, before he saw the exit door, the one leading outside, begin to distort. The steel frame around the exit was buckling. Slowly, methodically, the shape of the maintenance worker's imploded car window was being repeated on a grand scale. The metal was being pressed inward, the door frame shrinking, as if gripped by an invisible, impossibly strong hand. Alex dove behind a stack of rusted pipes just as the door frame gave way with a screech of tortured metal, bending into a crescent moon shape, effectively sealing the exit. He was trapped. His flashlight, which had been his only comfort, suddenly dimmed, then flickered violently. The beam narrowed, turning from bright white to a sickly, fading yellow. Alex stared at the dying light, his heart pounding against his ribs. The creature hadn't just sealed the doors, it was draining the power source. From the blackness now engulfing the room, a new sound emerged, a wet, clicking sound. It was fast, rhythmic, and drawing closer. He swung his flashlight, the weak yellow beam catching the floor near the sealed exit. The oily black substance wasn't just on the floor. It was coalescing, rising. And as it rose, it began to form sharp, reflective shapes that looked exactly like rows upon rows of razor-sharp, dark teeth. The entire tunnel of shadow was opening up, ready to consume him. Alex scrambled backward, dragging himself on his elbows, the fading yellow light of his flashlight casting long, grotesque shadows that seemed to mock his fear. The walls of teeth, formed from the congealed black substance, clicked and shimmered, advancing with unnerving speed. He was facing an entity that could manipulate matter and consume light. Running was useless. Fighting with a gun was pointless. He needed an angle, an exploit, a protocol. He glanced desperately around the loading bay, his eyes snapping to the massive overhead electrical distribution panel, a gray metal box with thick bundles of industrial cables running into it. Light. It consumes light. What happens if I overload it? The idea was insane, reckless, and his only option. If the creature was using the building's energy or absorbing ambient light, a massive surge might momentarily disrupt its equilibrium, or at least buy him a few seconds. He got to his feet and sprinted towards the panel, hugging the wall, trying to stay out of the direct path of the closing black tunnel. The oily blackness scraped past where he had been moments before, the clicking teeth barely inches from his heels. He reached the panel and ripped the heavy access door open. A tangle of color-coded wires and huge, industrial-grade circuit breakers greeted him. He needed the main power junction, the switch controlling the entire mill. His flashlight, now barely a feeble orange glow, finally died. Absolute darkness swallowed the loading bay, panic clawed at his throat, but Alex shoved it down. He was a cop. He worked the worst of the night shift. He relied on his training, his muscle memory, and the layout he'd absorbed when he first entered. He fumbled in the darkness, his fingers searching for the biggest, stiffest lever, the master switch. His hand brushed against a thick ceramic housing, got it. He braced himself and slammed the massive lever down, expecting silence. Instead, a profound, agonizing screech erupted from the darkness, the sound of stressed metal and something unearthly protesting violently. The power didn't cut, it surged. For one blinding, terrifying second, the entire loading bay was bathed in incandescent, brilliant white light. Every broken overhead lamp, every frayed junction box, every exposed wire, flared with a violent energy overload. The effect on the creature was immediate, the towering walls of black teeth shattered. The oily substance recoiled with sickening speed, pulling back toward the floor, sizzling as the intense light touched it, and for that second, Alex saw the entity clearly. It wasn't just black, it was a network of light-absorbing voids, held together in a skeletal shape. The light was agony to it, but the brilliance was too much for the old system. Wires snapped, transformers blew, and the overload tripped the main city grid fuse for Sector 4. The temporary brilliance vanished. The entire sector went silent and dark, plunged into a state of total blackout. The screeching stopped. The clicking teeth were gone. Alex dropped the dead flashlight and leaned against the panel, breathing hard, the smell of burnt ozone and copper choking him. He had overloaded the system, buying himself only a few seconds, and now the mill, and everything outside, was completely devoid of power or light. He reached into his utility belt and pulled out his secondary light source, a small, sturdy red filter tactical lamp, designed not to ruin night vision. He flicked it on. The weak, ruby-red light cut a small, safe circle around him. The scraping sound was back, not fast this time, but slow, deliberate, and closer. Alex looked down. The black residue was still on the floor, but it wasn't moving. It was stationary, waiting that he moved quietly toward the sealed exit door. He put his ear against the bent steel. Absolute silence outside. The blackout was complete. Backup wasn't coming anytime soon. He needed to escape, but the door was impossibly warped. He scanned the area with his red light and saw it, a tiny, almost hidden ventilation duct in the ceiling, usually meant for exhaust. Barely large enough for a man, Alex holstered his gun and began scaling a precarious stack of unstable wooden crates, climbing silently toward the duct. As he reached the top crate, his foot slipped. The stack of wood shifted with a loud creak. The silence of the room was instantly broken. From the floor, the black, oily substance rose again, but not as walls of teeth. This time, it rose in a single, massive shadow hand, its surface bubbling as it stretched impossibly fast, reaching for the only light source left in the mill, the faint red glow of his lamp. And from the center of the darkness, the multi-layered voice spoke, calmer now, laced with a chilling, possessive hunger. "You cannot put out the sun, detective. But I can put out your little spark. You belong to the dark now." The shadow hand ascended with impossible speed, a silent tide of concentrated blackness. Alex didn't hesitate. He thrust his red filter lamp toward the closing maw of the duct, letting go of the unstable crates. He scrambled onto the thin, rusted ledge leading to the vent opening. The huge, oily hand slammed into the metal crate he had just left, crushing the wood into splinters with effortless force. The impact reverberated through the steel framework. Alex reached the vent opening. It was small, tight, and smelled faintly of old industrial dust and stale air, but it was his only chance. He jammed his foot into the opening, kicking away some loose bolts, and began to squeeze through, ignoring the pain of the rough, sharp edges scraping his jacket and skin. He managed to get his torso through the vent opening just as the creature's mass began to pool directly beneath him. The shadow hand retreated, but the oily blackness now flowed up the wall, forming a wide, pulsing ring directly under the vent. It knew he was there. The creature's voice, a dry, abrasive whisper, resonated up the shaft. "The air is still part of the darkness, detective. You merely traded one cage for another." Alex pushed his hips through, fighting the claustrophobia. He needed to find a spot where he could drop without being consumed. He risked a backward glance. The mass of the creature was now stretching into a grotesque, elongated shape, its upper half thinning, its surface shimmering. A thin, needle-like spike of blackness shot up and grazed the heel of his boot. He felt an instant, shocking cold that went straight to the bone, followed by a surge of debilitating weakness. It doesn't need to touch much to drain you. With a grunt of pure effort, Alex pulled his legs through and landed on his stomach inside the narrow ventilation shaft. The creature's spike slammed into the grating he had just passed through, bending the metal like clay. He began to crawl desperately through the dark tunnel. The faint red glow of his tactical lamp, which he had managed to wedge into his belt, was his only guide. He crawled for what felt like an eternity, the narrow metal casing amplifying every sound, his rasping breath, the scraping of his clothes, and the horrifying, rhythmic thump, 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 coming from the duct behind him. It's following. It's inside the walls. He reached a junction, a vertical drop of about 15 feet into a lower pipe system. He checked his SIG P226, only 4 rounds left. Useless against this thing, but a comfort nonetheless. He found an inspection hatch, unlatched the rusty bolts, and peered down. Below him was a massive, abandoned storage room filled with defunct machinery and heavy wooden crates, a different sector entirely, likely Sector B. The floor was concrete, littered with debris. Alex knew this drop was dangerous, but continuing in the vent was suicide. He lowered himself through the opening and dropped, landing hard and rolling to absorb the impact. His ankle screamed in protest, but he fought the pain. He shone his red light around the new room. It was cold, damp, and mercifully quiet. Thump, thump, thump. The sound was still there, but muffled, coming from the walls of the storage room. The creature was tracking him. Alex limped toward the nearest exit, a single steel door labeled Office Annex. He tried the handle. Locked, of course. He quickly scanned the immediate area. A discarded forklift. A box of long, thick iron rods, probably used for reinforcement. He grabbed the nearest iron rod, hefting the heavy metal. It wouldn't kill the creature, but it might momentarily repel the light-sensitive mass. He heard the thump-thump speed up. The wall closest to him began to bulge inward, the sheet metal straining under immense, invisible pressure. Alex raised the iron rod, preparing to strike, and then, he saw it, nestled between two large stacks of machinery, a small, blinking light, an anomaly in the total blackout. It was the low-power indicator light on an ancient, floor-standing power generator, a relic from the mills. Active days, now covered in dust. The creature was closing in, the wall flexing horribly. Alex ignored it. He hobbled toward the generator, his mind racing. If he could restart the generator, he could get localized light and power, possibly enough to open the door and escape the immediate vicinity. He dropped his iron rod, knelt by the generator, and pulled the old, rusty choke lever. He grabbed the pull cord, his adrenaline-fueled strength overwhelming his pain. He pulled once. Nothing. He pulled again, harder. The cord snapped back, hitting the casing with a loud, hollow thwack. The wall near him exploded inward, shards of metal screamed across the room. The black, oily mass poured through the gap, not as a hand, but as a silent, undulating tide, spreading across the floor towards him. Alex looked at the shattered wall, then back at the generator. He had one last chance. He pulled the cord one final time, putting every ounce of his remaining energy into the yank. The generator roared to life. It was a sputtering, coughing, weak sound, but glorious. A single, dusty bulb hanging above the generator sputtered, then cast a fragile, yellow-orange light over the immediate area. The black tide stopped instantly, recoiling violently from the light. Where the light touched it, the substance steamed and shrank, letting out a faint, dry hiss. The voice was closer than ever, a furious, frustrated snarl that shook the air around the buzzing generator. "You are a dying light, Thorn. And I will extinguish you forever." Alex didn't reply. He grabbed the discarded iron rod, his eyes fixed on the creature's frustrated mass, and slammed the rod's blunt end into the old steel door's locking mechanism. He had a few seconds of light. He had to make them count. Alex swung the heavy iron rod like a desperate batter, aiming for the rusted locking mechanism of the annex door. Sparks flew as metal met metal. The old mechanism screamed under the assault, finally shattering with a grinding crunch. He threw his weight against the door. It groaned open just enough for him to squeeze through, the sickly yellow light of the sputtering generator barely illuminating his escape. He stumbled into the office annex, a claustrophobic maze of small, dusty rooms, cubicles with yellowed partitions, and filing cabinets stacked high. The air here was drier, cleaner, lacking the metallic tang of the refinery. He slammed the door shut behind him and immediately began moving filing cabinets against it, creating a makeshift barricade. The generator's light was local. He was still the only source of light in a sector-wide blackout. He had to assume the creature was recovering and preparing its next move. He leaned against a filing cabinet, gasping for breath, the small red filter lamp now back in his hand, supplementing the weak overhead light. He checked his ankle, swollen and throbbing. He needed to find a way out of the annex and back to the outside world, or at least a working phone. As his eyes adjusted to the dimness, he noticed the strange organization of the office. This wasn't a standard corporate space. Every desk was covered in meticulously organized stacks of folders, but they weren't financial or production records. Alex picked up a random file. The label read, Project, Shadow Line, Subject D, Riley, Initial Fear Assessment. His blood ran cold. He flipped the folder open. Inside were detailed psychiatric profiles, schematics of the mill, and handwritten notes about sensory deprivation efficacy and fear harvesting. This isn't just an old steel mill. It's an archive. And they were studying fear. He frantically checked other files. One was labeled Target, Graffiti Artist, another, Target, Night Watchman. The three missing victims weren't random. They had been chosen, documented, and studied. He found the main desk, covered in maps and complex diagrams. A large, leather-bound ledger lay open on the blotter. He shone his red light on the spine, Monarch Mill Internal Logs, 1980 to 1985. Alex realized the full horror. The mill had been a covert research facility, and the thing in Sector C wasn't just a monster, it was an experiment, perhaps even the archivist of their work. That he quickly scanned the ledger. The last entries were chilling. May 14, 1985, Subject 0 is exhibiting advanced photophobia and mass absorption capabilities. Requires constant sensory deprivation to maintain containment. The darkness is not a barrier, it is his food source. May 15, 1985, the containment team is reporting auditory hallucinations, voices whispering names. High-level anxiety and rapid aging in staff. 0 is communicating not through sound, but through draining the consciousness. We are being read. May 16, 1985, total project shutdown initiated. The protocol failed. 0 is loose within the facility. The only known weakness, a sustained, total spectrum light field. May God help us. Alex slammed the book shut, his mind reeling. A sustained, total spectrum light field. That meant flooding the area with everything from infrared to ultraviolet. He had only managed a momentary power spike. The fragile light from the generator began to flicker violently, buzzing with a desperate frequency. It's draining the generator from a distance that he had seconds. He had to find the source of the experiments, the central control room, the original containment area. The files held the key to its weakness. He grabbed the shadow line folder on Riley and bolted toward a door marked Lower Lab Access. Just as he reached the door, the generator light went out with a wet, final pop. Total darkness returned, this time absolute and final. The silence lasted for 3 heartbeats. Then, the barricaded door to the storage room rattled violently. The filing cabinets began to slide back, slowly, inexorably, as if pushed by a bulldozer, and from the darkness of the office annex, a new, sickening sound emerged. Directly behind him, a rhythmic scratching, like long, sharp fingernails dragging across the steel of the filing cabinets. The creature wasn't attacking the barricade. It had found another way. It was already inside the annex, hiding in the darkness, ready to drain the last spark of light from Detective Alex Thorne. Alex froze, his back pressed against the door labeled Lower Lab Access. The rhythmic scratching behind him accelerated, growing frantic. The sound wasn't coming from the floor or the ceiling, it seemed to be echoing directly out of the metal itself, the filing cabinets, the steel desk, the very frame of the room. He knew he couldn't outrun it in the narrow confines of the office. He needed the lab. He slammed his shoulder against the door. It was locked. C4, B5, D2. Alex remembered the security protocol from his police training, a long-forgotten method of bypassing magnetic locks. He fumbled for his multi-tool, his fingers brushing the correct contacts on the door frame, using the tiny residual current to try and trip the release. The scratching stopped abruptly. The silence was deafening, suffocating. Then, the air in the small office cubicle where Alex was trapped grew bitterly cold, the kind of cold that steals heat instantly. Alex felt a presence materialize directly behind him. He didn't see it, he felt the absolute void, the total absence of light and warmth. He could sense the impossibly tall, thin shape towering over him. A wave of crushing despair washed over him, a profound, soul-deep terror that threatened to buckle his knees. This was the entity's power, the ability to drain consciousness, to harvest fear. Riley's fear. The Watchman's fear. It's all here. It's feeding me their memories. He fought against the paralysis, pushing back against the psychic weight. He twisted the multi-tool one final, desperate time. The door latch clicked open. Alex didn't look back. He shoved the door inward and dove headfirst into the lower lab access, rolling onto the cold, tiled floor. He was in a small, square room lined with old electrical conduit and heavy, reinforced paneling. This looked like a containment chamber. He scrambled to his feet and slammed the lab door shut, turning the massive, bolted wheel lock, securing himself inside. He leaned against the door, gasping, sweat dripping from his face. The voice hammered inside his skull, a dry, furious whisper, "Don't hide from the dark, Thorne. Embrace your vacancy." A heavy thud hit the outside of the door, followed by a grating shriek of metal as the creature tested the seal. The reinforced door held. Alex switched his red filter lamp back on. The room was sparsely furnished, a heavy steel table bolted to the floor, a bank of outdated monitoring equipment, and, most importantly, a single, modern-looking, brightly colored orange toolbox on the table. He limped toward the table, grabbing the toolbox. Inside, he found what he was looking for, not standard tools, but specialized equipment, lenses, fiber optic cable, and, thankfully, a handful of high-intensity, industrial-grade xenon flash lamps. These were designed for emergency signaling and burned with an almost painful, brilliant white light. He also found a schematic map of the immediate sublevels taped to the underside of the lid. It showed the lower lab access connecting to a larger area marked core shielding/power injection point. The key to the total spectrum light field. Alex grabbed 2 flash lamps, stuffing one in his pocket, and pocketed the schematic. The door behind him was groaning ominously. The creature was twisting the heavy metal. He saw the next exit, a smaller, lighter door marked simply, injection. He needed to set a trap. He glanced at the table. He took the remaining xenon lamp, grabbed the spool of thin fiber optic cable, and quickly wrapped the cable around the lamp, securing it with tape. He then ran the cable back toward the main entrance door, the one the creature was trying to breach. He pulled out his last remaining gear, a small, high-tension tripwire mechanism used for perimeter defense. He rigged the fiber optic cable to the door handle and the tripwire switch, positioning the xenon lamp under the door's threshold. His plan, when the creature finally forced the door open, its sheer mass would break the fiber optic cable, tripping the high-voltage switch on the lamp, momentarily blinding and repelling it. It was a single-shot distraction. The heavy door screamed as the creature managed to bend the thick steel. A sliver of absolute blackness appeared in the gap. Alex finished the rigging, grabbed the iron rod, and stood ready. The creature didn't smash the door. It twisted the metal slowly, deliberately, as if savoring the moment, and then, a new voice, not the dry, multi-layered whisper, but a clear, chillingly human baritone, spoke from the gap. The power source is still external, Thorn. You are merely burning the fuel faster. I can wait for the ashes. Alex realized the full horror of the situation. The creature could see the trap. It was reading his fear, his thoughts. He acted instantly. He slammed the iron rod into the rigged fiber optic cable, shattering it. The xenon lamp flashed, bathing the room in a blinding, instantaneous white sunburst. The human-like voice turned into a deafening, non-verbal scream of agony from outside the door. Alex bolted for the injection door, the residual burning light of the xenon lamp his only cover. He pulled the handle, plunged into the darkness of the power core, and slammed the door shut, locking it behind him. He was deep inside the mill now, surrounded by the remnants of the experiment. He had momentarily repelled the creature, but he knew the battle was far from over. He was heading for the core, a small red light on the schematic his only guidance, the injection point. It was time to try and use the lab's own defense protocols against its prisoner. Alex found himself in a narrow, vertical service shaft, his red filter lamp cutting a dim path through the darkness. He followed the schematic, using rusted ladders to descend 3 levels deeper into the Monarch Mill substructure. The air grew stale, thick with the smell of old coolant and heavy metals. He reached the bottom level and pushed open a lightweight plastic hatch. The schematic indicated this was the core shielding/power injection point. He stepped into a circular chamber, the size of a small gymnasium, dominated by a massive, central structure, a 15-foot tall, thick-walled steel cylinder, labeled reactor housing, decommissioned. This was clearly the containment point for Subject 0. The walls of the chamber were lined with thick, blackened industrial glass panels, behind which ran massive, copper power cables, each thicker than Alex's arm. The entire chamber was designed to deliver an overwhelming burst of energy. Alex's red light found a control console embedded in the wall opposite the reactor housing. He hobbled toward it. The console was a complex array of analog dials, cracked screens, and heavy-duty, military-grade switches. A small, green indicator light was blinking faintly next to a large red switch labeled Shield Injection Override. He touched the panel. It was cold. He began frantically tracing the wiring based on the schematic, his mind racing to recall the old logbook entry. Sustained, total spectrum light field. The console had 3 main power conduits, one marked UV, one marked xenon, high lux, and one marked infrared, heat induction. They were the 3 spectrums needed to create the total spectrum light field. They were all offline. Alex spotted a maintenance panel on the console, a thin slot. He reached for his police badge, the heavy brass rectangle, and jammed it into the slot, using it to bypass the old, defunct security lock. The panel snapped open, revealing the intricate, color-coded internal wiring that he needed to reconnect all 3 spectrum conduits to the main power bus, a task requiring precise, split-second work in the darkness. That he grabbed the nearest UV wire. As his fingers wrapped around the copper, the chamber went silent. The faint mechanical hum of the old equipment died. It's here, the main entrance to the core shielding chamber, a massive vault door high up on the wall, began to grind open slowly. Not forced, but unlocked. Alex ignored the sound and connected the UV wire, twisting the copper strands together with his multi-tool. A small, satisfying spark illuminated his face. From the now fully open vault door, the tall, impossibly slender shadow slid into the chamber. It moved with silent, fluid grace, a profound absence of light and sound. Alex could hear the dry, multi-layered voice, closer than it had ever been. "Stop wasting the energy, detective. It's a closed system. Whatever light you generate, I will consume. I am the end of the line." Alex snatched the xenon, high lux, wire. As he worked, the entity began to glide down the wall towards him. He was perhaps 30 feet from it. It stopped 15 feet away. It began to ripple, the black, oily mass concentrating, shifting its shape from a slender figure into a wider, more dominant presence, a column of pure, consuming darkness. From the center of the column, a single, impossibly bright white pinprick appeared, like a single, malignant star. It wasn't light, it was an eye formed by the absence of light, focused entirely on Alex. The psychological attack returned, overwhelming. Alex saw Riley's final moments, the paralyzing realization that the shadows were heavy. He saw the watchman's slow, cold vacancy. He felt the entity pressing on his consciousness, looking for the deepest point of his despair. Alex gritted his teeth, sweat stinging his eyes. He connected the xenon wire. A louder, more powerful snap of electricity. 2 out of 3. He grabbed the infrared wire, his hand shaking violently from the combination of pain, adrenaline, and psychic assault. The column of darkness lunged. It covered the remaining distance in a single, silent rush, its mass expanding to encompass the entire console. Alex was enveloped in the black, oily wave, the profound cold instantly sinking into his flesh, stealing his body heat and his strength. He felt the overwhelming, draining pressure. His vision swam. He was losing it. No. I am the light. I brought the light. With the last remnants of his strength, driven by pure defiance, Alex slammed the final infrared wire onto the bus bar. A cascade of sparks erupted. He slammed his hand onto the large, red shield injection override switch, flipping it hard. The massive copper cables along the walls pulsed, not with light, but with raw, surging electricity. The entire chamber roared with power. The entity that was consuming Alex shrieked, a high, physical, agonizing sound that tore through the air. The oily mass recoiled, spitting Alex out onto the cold floor, and then, it happened. The entire reactor housing cylinder flashed. The chamber was instantly flooded with a blinding, total spectrum light field, UV rays crackling, high-lux xenon beams burning white-hot, and infrared heat radiating in an impossible wave. The creature, Subject 0, was caught fully in the light. It wasn't just repelled, it was disintegrating. The dense black mass violently tore apart, sizzling and evaporating like water on a 1,000-degree surface, its volume shrinking with terrifying speed. Alex, curled on the floor, shielded his eyes from the agonizing light. He heard the final, desperate cry of the entity, "The darkness will come for all the stars." Then, silence. The total spectrum light field faded, the emergency power drained. The chamber was dark, quiet, and thankfully, empty. The creature was gone. But Alex knew the truth. it wasn't destroyed. It was just repelled. It was somewhere in the total darkness of the sector, waiting for the light to truly fail. Alex lay sprawled on the cold concrete floor of the core shielding chamber, gasping for air. The smell of ozone, burnt circuitry, and the sickening tang of whatever the entity was made of hung thick in the air. He pushed himself up, his body trembling with exhaustion and the lingering, icy grip of the creature's psychic attack that he checked his surroundings with his red filter lamp. The reactor housing was silent. The console was smoking, its power completely depleted. Subject Zero was gone, forced back into the absolute darkness of the surrounding mill. It's not dead. It's hiding that he dragged himself to the vault door the creature had opened, now his only way out. He climbed the high ladder and squeezed through the gap. He was now in a different service corridor, equally dark and silent. He finally reached his police radio and tried the channel again. Dispatch. This is Detective Thorne. I'm deep inside the Monarch Mill, Sector 4. The threat is neutralized for now. Repeat, neutralized, not eliminated. I need SWAT, fire, and hazmat, full containment protocol. Block all roads leading into Sector 4. No one comes in. The radio crackled to life, the dispatcher's voice shaky and muffled. Thorne? Detective, we've been trying to raise you for 40 minutes. Backup units are being rerouted, there's an emergency alert. The blackout, it's spreading. It's not just Sector 4 anymore. We're losing power across the whole city grid. A fresh wave of dread hit Alex. The creature, Subject Zero, had consumed the local power grid to fuel its growth. Now, it was attacking the entire city's power source. Listen to me. The thing inside this mill, it feeds on light and life force. It needs absolute darkness to move and grow. The citywide blackout is its hunting ground. We hear you, Detective. Units are mobilizing. Stay put. We're sending extraction personnel now. Alex knew now meant an hour, given the chaotic situation. He couldn't wait. The creature was out there, feeding on the spreading darkness. He limped down the service corridor, the red light casting his shadow in grotesque shapes. He needed to get outside, regain control, and try to bring the city's power back online, the only true shield against the entity. He found a stairwell and started the long climb up. On the 5th floor, he reached a window, caked in grime, but offering a view of the city. He wiped the glass clean and looked out. The sight was apocalyptic. The city, usually a brilliant tapestry of light, was a sprawling canvas of dead blackness. Neon signs, street lamps, building lights, all extinguished. The only visible illumination came from the faint red and blue flashes of emergency vehicles far in the distance, tiny, isolated sparks in a sea of night. The blackout was total. The creature had won the night. As Alex watched the silent, dark city, his eyes caught a subtle movement on the street far below, near the outer perimeter fence of the mill. A figure, tall, too thin, and utterly black, was standing beside a defunct street lamp. It wasn't the creature. It was a man, illuminated briefly by the sweeping beam of a distant searchlight. The figure was wearing a crisp, well-tailored suit. He looked professional, perhaps corporate. He was carrying a small, metallic briefcase. The man looked up, directly at Alex's window, even from the hundreds of feet below. It was an impossible sighting, yet the man met Alex's gaze. The man lifted his briefcase and opened it just a crack. Inside, a small, vibrant purple light pulsed, strange and unnatural. The suit-wearing figure then executed a chilling gesture. He slowly raised his hand and used a single finger to trace the same interlocking helix of 3 loops, the symbol from the gate, on the side of his own head. He was the orchestrator. He was the one who had released Subject Zero. The figure smiled, a wide, impossibly slow grin that was terrifying even from that distance. He then closed the briefcase, plunging the purple light back into darkness, and vanished silently into the absolute gloom of the city. Alex stumbled back from the window, his breath ragged. This wasn't just a monster, it was a weapon, and it had been unleashed by someone with a plan. He looked down at the evidence in his hand, the discarded Shadowline folder. Riley's assessment. The fear-harvesting protocol, the creature was gone, but the archivist of fear was now loose in the city, carrying the purple light, and Alex was the only one who knew his face that he had to get out. The battle was no longer confined to the mill. Alex ripped open his jacket and pulled out a small, disposable medical kit from his inner pocket, using the contents to tightly wrap his sprained ankle. The pain was a dull, constant throb, but the immediate threat of Subject Zero had sharpened his focus. The figure in the suit, the archivist, was the key. He had a deliberate plan, a contained light source, the purple one, and the horrifying helix symbol as his signature. The battle was now a chase, and Alex was hopelessly far behind. He found a maintenance ladder leading down to a lower exterior walkway, bypassing the locked main offices. He slid down, dropping onto the gravel, wincing as his injured ankle took the weight. He limped toward the perimeter fence, his red filter lamp casting long, frantic shadows. He had to assume the suit was gone, swallowed by the citywide blackout, but he was looking for any sign of a rushed departure. He reached the spot where the archivist had been standing. He shone his light on the cracked asphalt. Nothing. The man was too careful. Alex then turned his light on the defunct street lamp nearby. It was not just dark, the glass housing was cracked, and the metal pole had a strange, geometric burn mark near the base, the helix symbol, scorched into the steel. The symbol wasn't just a sign, it was a catalyst. A point of energy release, perhaps, to siphon power from the grid and draw the darkness. Alex moved toward the abandoned police cruiser, Unit 503. He needed a vehicle, but the car was dead, its power drained entirely. He found the shotgun rack. Locked. He took a heavy police-issue bolt cutter from the trunk of his own unmarked car and shattered the lock, freeing the standard-issue shotgun and a handful of specialized rounds. They wouldn't kill the entity, but they might slow down the suit if he encountered him. He heard a distant sound, the faint, desperate wail of sirens, muffled by the blackout and the distance. Backup was coming, but too slowly. He had to find the archivist. And he had one lead, the Shadowline file. He pulled the folder out. Inside, beneath Riley's assessment, was a handwritten, heavily redacted note. The project's primary funding conduit is a shell corporation, Ethereum Global Logistics, AGL. Their current base of operations is the old municipal power station in the downtown industrial zone, DIZ. They are securing the secondary containment unit, The archivist wasn't just causing chaos, he was setting up a second base. And it was at the city's power station, the exact place Alex needed to be to restore the light. Alex looked up at the total blackness of the city. Downtown industrial zone was miles away. The roads would be chaos. He needed a clear path, and only one route was still open and likely clear of abandoned cars, the old elevated rail line that ran parallel to the highway, directly into DIZ. It was dangerous, precarious, and currently deserted. He scrambled over the perimeter fence, the bolt cutters still in hand, and began limping towards the dark, skeletal structure of the elevated rail line. He reached the rail bed and climbed onto the tracks. The twin steel rails stretched ahead into the terrifying darkness, a narrow, treacherous path high above the silent, dead city. He started walking along the tracks, the steel cold and slick under his boots. He had gone less than 50 yards when the faint, distant sound of the sirens abruptly stopped. Complete silence returned. Alex stopped, his heart hammering. They weren't just delayed, they had been stopped. He looked back toward the Monarch Mill. The massive, dead structure loomed in the absolute darkness, and then he saw it, high above the mill, etched against the black sky, a faint, slow-moving shimmer. The shimmering grew, concentrating itself into a vast, undulating black curtain, taller than the mill itself. It was Subject Zero, having consumed the power from the grid, now manifesting in an immense, city-sized form. The column of absolute darkness began to move, flowing over the mill and into the city streets below. It wasn't running, it was gliding, a literal shadow enveloping the surrounding blocks, consuming any residual light, any residual life, and as it flowed, Alex heard a wave of sound rise from the city, not screams, but a faint, collective, low-frequency hum. It was the sound of thousands of people, suddenly paralyzed by a soul-deep fear. The harvest had begun. Alex gripped the shotgun. He knew the creature wasn't following him yet, its hunger was too great. But the archivist was heading for the power station, and the creature would follow. He turned and began to run along the rail line, ignoring the stabbing pain in his ankle. He was racing against the spread of an entity that was actively turning his city into its feeding ground. The fate of the city rested on Alex beating the dark to the light. Alex ran, bounding over the rusted ties of the elevated rail line, the immense, terrifying sound of the city's collective fear humming behind him. His injured ankle was screaming, but the sight of the expanding shadow mass was a brutal motivator. He could now see the downtown industrial zone ahead. Looming amidst the dark skyscrapers was the low, blocky structure of the municipal power station. His target. He jumped off the rail line onto a maintenance ramp that led directly to the roof of a low-rise warehouse adjacent to the power station. He shattered a skylight with the butt of the shotgun and dropped inside, landing hard on his good leg, the pain almost unbearable. He emerged from the warehouse and found himself in the deserted courtyard of the power station. The main building was a fortress of silent, dark concrete. He tried the main doors, locked and barred. He moved around to the service bay and found a small, unsecured access panel for the emergency turbine. He used the bolt cutters to pry the heavy panel open and squeezed inside, emerging into the pitch-black engine room. Using his red lamp, he found the central control room, a blast-proof glass booth overlooking the massive, silent turbines. The power was dead, but the emergency controls were analog. He found the main console. A placard on the wall showed the emergency sequence for bringing the massive station back online, detailing the need for a phased ignition sequence to avoid a sector-wide meltdown. He had to get the turbines firing and the main light grid active. He threw the heavy, primary circuit breaker. Nothing. Too many safety overrides. Suddenly, a clear, slow clap echoed from the darkness behind him. Alex spun around, leveling the shotgun. The archivist was standing in the doorway of the control booth, bathed in the faint, eerie purple light emanating from the briefcase he now held open. He was pristine, unhurried, his tailored suit perfectly neat. "Remarkable, Detective Thorne," the archivist said, his voice a calm, intellectual baritone. "You navigated the darkness. But you can't restart the sun without a key." Alex saw the key, a single, heavy, cylindrical power cell resting in the briefcase, next to the purple light source. "That light source. It's keeping your pet away," Alex observed, struggling to keep his voice steady. The archivist chuckled softly. "The Ethereum conduit. It's not keeping him away, it's guiding him. Subject 0 is a quantum drain. The purple light, UV filtration, is the scent, the bait. He's coming for me now. And soon, he will arrive and consume the power cell to complete the harvest." He raised the briefcase, aiming the purple light at Alex. "Unfortunately, your sacrifice is required to fully saturate the area. I need the control room covered in fear." Alex fired the shotgun. The blast roared in the enclosed space. The archivist didn't move. The buckshot simply splashed against an invisible, shimmering barrier surrounding the man, like hitting reinforced glass. The barrier was the same oily black substance, held taut by the purple light's unique energy. "Charming, but futile," the archivist sighed. "Now, hold still." The archivist threw the briefcase. It spun end over end, landing with a clatter in the center of the control room. The purple light went out. Instantly, the entire room was plunged into absolute, consuming darkness. A low, familiar thump echoed from the service tunnel outside. Subject 0 had arrived. Drawn by the darkness and the scent of the power cell, Alex had mere seconds. He ignored the paralyzing fear and lunged for the main console. He saw the archivist's faint outline retreating through the turbine hall, leaving him as bait. He reached the console and fumbled for the manual override cables, the analog connection points. He pulled out the UV, xenon, and infrared wires from his pocket, the salvaged conduits from the mill. He had to bypass the phased ignition sequence. He had to create the total spectrum light field on a citywide scale. The massive, black column of Subject 0 flowed into the control booth. radiating cold and absolute silence. It lunged for Alex. Alex jammed the 3 salvaged wires, UV, xenon, and infrared, into the main bus bar of the power station's console. He slammed his hand onto the largest lever, the main turbine ignition. A cataclysmic surge ripped through the power station. The turbines roared to life, not with a gentle hum, but with an earth-shattering burst of energy. The power station became the new reactor housing. The entire control room, the turbine hall, the adjacent buildings, everything within a quarter-mile radius, was flooded with a sustained, agonizing, multispectrum light field. UV light crackled from the emergency transformers, xenon flash tubes on the roof blew, bathing the area in brilliant white, and the intense heat of the overloaded turbines radiated. Infrared waves. Subject Zero was caught in the center of the surge. The immense black mass didn't just sizzle, it screamed. A sound that wasn't sound, but a tearing of reality itself. The mass violently compressed, twisting into a furious, diminishing coil of void. Alex saw the face of the creature for one final, agonizing moment. The blank, oily blackness contorted into an expression of impossible hatred and pain. Then, with a final, violent implosion of cold air, Subject Zero was gone. Vanished. The city's power grid snapped back online. A blinding, beautiful tapestry of light exploded across the dark metropolis. Streetlights flared, apartment windows glowed, neon signs buzzed back to life. The city was saved. Alex collapsed, the heavy shotgun clattering beside him, basking in the glorious, healing warmth of the restored light. Epilogue Detective Alex Thorne received a 2-week medical leave and a silent commendation for his heroic actions during the Sector 4 power anomaly. The official report attributed the disappearances and the blackout to a massive, isolated failure of the Monarch Mill's experimental power unit. 1 week later, Alex was back at the precinct, his ankle healed, his eyes tired but sharp. He stood in the clean, bright precinct, staring at his corkboard. A new map was tacked up. It was a grid of the entire city. And in 3 different, geographically separate locations, a new library construction site, an abandoned subway tunnel, and a closed bank vault, someone had recently spray-painted the same unsettling symbol, the interlocking helix of 3 loops. Alex picked up a file